You feel it before you can name it. That heaviness behind the eyes. The slow ache spreading through your joints like something being poured into your bones. The moment your body stops feeling like yours and starts feeling like something you are trapped inside, you know what is coming. You have felt it before. But here is the thing. When you get sick today, you have options. You have medicine, doctors, pharmacies, thermometers, antivirals, antibiotics. You have centuries of accumulated knowledge sitting in a small orange bottle on your bathroom shelf, waiting for you. Your ancestors had none of that. When a human got sick 100,000 years ago, there was no diagnosis, no treatment plan, no hospital. There was just a body in pain and the ancient world pressing in from every direction. So what happened? The answer is stranger, more fascinating, and more deeply connected to you than you might expect. Let us start with the body itself. Your immune system is old. Not just old, ancient in a way that should stop you for a moment. The core machinery that is fighting infection inside you right now was already running in creatures that existed 500 million years ago. Researchers like Charles Janeway Jr., who spent decades mapping the innate immune system, showed that the very first line of your body's defense is essentially unchanged from the immune response of a sea urchin. Think about that. A sea urchin. The inflammation, the fever, the flood of white blood cells mobilizing through your veins. Your body was doing all of this long before humans existed, long before anything with a spine existed, long before anything you would recognize as an animal walked the earth. Which means your ancestors' bodies already knew how to fight. The question was never whether the body could respond. The question was whether the body could win before the infection, the cold, the wound, or the starvation finished the fight first. Fever was the first weapon. When ancient humans got sick, their bodies did something deeply counterintuitive. They raised their own internal temperature on purpose. Your brain, specifically a tiny region called the hypothalamus, receives a chemical signal from immune cells and deliberately makes you hotter. Not because something has gone wrong, because everything is going exactly as designed. Heat kills bacteria. It disrupts the protein structures that pathogens need to survive and replicate. It speeds up the movement of immune cells through your bloodstream, getting them where they need to be faster. A fever is not your body losing control. It is your body turning up the furnace on purpose, cooking the invaders from the inside. Your ancestors did not know any of that, but they could feel the fire building, and they understood, on some level shaped by 1,000,000 years of pattern recognition, that fire inside the body meant war. What they did next is where it gets genuinely remarkable. Evidence from archaeological sites and from careful study of modern hunter-gatherer populations suggests that sick individuals were not abandoned. This matters. There is a persistent myth woven into popular understanding of early humans, that survival of the fittest meant ruthlessness, that the weak were left behind. The fossil record tells a completely different story. In 1953, researchers excavating Shanidar Cave in what is now northern Iraq uncovered the skeletal remains of a Neanderthal, not Homo sapiens, but our closest extinct relative, who had survived for years with a withered and largely useless right arm, damage to the bone around one eye socket suggesting possible blindness in that eye, and severe arthritis throughout the joints. This individual, now known as Shanidar I, could not have survived alone. The injuries were too extensive. The research team, led by the archaeologist Ralph Selecki, concluded that this person had been cared for by others, fed, protected, perhaps assisted in moving, for a significant stretch of time before death finally came. Care is ancient. The instinct to look after the sick did not begin with civilization, with cities, with writing, or with medicine as a profession. It began far earlier, built into the social architecture of the tight groups that humans and their relatives lived in for millions of years. Your ancestors survived in bands of roughly 20 to 50 individuals. Everyone knew everyone. Every person's skills and labor mattered to the group's survival. When one person fell ill, the group felt it immediately. A skilled hunter too weak to stand. A mother too feverish to nurse her infant. These were not personal problems. They were community crises. So the group adapted. Others took on the tasks the sick person could not do. Someone brought water. Someone sat nearby. Someone, eventually, tried to do something about the illness itself. This is where medicine begins. Not in a laboratory, not in a lecture hall. In the hands of someone watching a person they cared about suffer, and reaching for whatever might help. The first medicines were plants. And the evidence for this is older and stranger than most people realize. A 2012 study by researchers examining the remains at Shanidar Cave found clusters of pollen associated with burial sites, including plants like ephedra, groundsel, and grape hyacinth, many of which have documented medicinal properties. Whether these plants were placed with the dead as ritual, as medicine, or as something that blended both without distinction, the finding points to the same conclusion. Early humans paid extraordinary attention to plants and their effects on the body. They had to. Your brain is built for pattern recognition above almost everything else. If someone in the group ate a particular root and their stomach pain eased within hours, that information was remembered and shared. If a certain leaf pressed against a wound seemed to reduce swelling, that discovery was passed down. If a bark boiled in water broke a fever faster than doing nothing, that knowledge spread through the group. Over thousands of generations, across hundreds of thousands of years, this accumulated into something remarkable. A living pharmacopoeia, carried entirely in human memory, shared orally from elder to child, long before anyone had written a single symbol anywhere. The World Health Organization estimates that even today, roughly 80% of the world's population relies primarily on traditional plant-based remedies as their main form of healthcare. That thread, connecting contemporary herbal medicine all the way back to its deepest origins, is unbroken. It stretches back to a person crouching in firelight, watching someone they loved be in pain, and reaching for the one thing they knew might help. Now consider what ancient sickness actually felt like from the inside. When you get sick today, your first instinct is usually to do nothing, to rest, to go still, to close the curtains and sleep through it. And this is not weakness. This is not laziness. This is an ancient program activating inside you, one that runs far deeper than conscious choice. Researchers studying what is now called sickness behavior, a framework developed and expanded significantly by the neuroscientist Robert Dancer starting in the 1990s, have shown that the fatigue, the lost appetite, the social withdrawal, the bone-deep desire to be still that you feel when you are ill, are not side effects of the illness. They are deliberate immune strategies, built into your biology over millions of years. When you stop eating, you deny pathogens certain nutrients they depend on to replicate. When you conserve physical energy, your body reroutes those resources directly to the immune response, which is metabolically expensive and needs every calorie it can get. When you withdraw socially and go quiet, you reduce the risk of spreading illness through your group and protect yourself from secondary infections while your defenses are already stretched. Your ancient ancestors had no name for any of this. No concept of pathogens or metabolism or immune cells, but their bodies did exactly the same thing. A sick person in a hunter-gatherer band would go still, eat less, sleep more, pull back from the noise of the group. Not because they were being cast out, but because something deep in their own biology was pulling them inward, conserving everything for the fight happening below the surface. And the group understood, because every person in that band had been sick before. They recognized it. They knew what it looked like. There was also another dimension to how ancient people responded to illness, one that did not operate on the body at all, but on the mind, or what those ancient people might have understood as the spirit. In every human culture ever studied, without a single exception, illness has been connected to something beyond the purely physical. The anthropologist Pascal Boyer spent years examining how human minds process unexplained events, and his research shows that your brain is a relentless meaning-making machine. When something goes wrong, particularly something invisible and internal like disease, the mind demands an explanation that fits inside the framework of beliefs it already holds. This is why, across cultures separated by oceans and millennia, ancient Mesopotamia, early Chinese civilization, indigenous communities across the Americas, pre-colonial Africa, sickness was understood as something caused by spirits, by broken social rules, by the anger of ancestors, by an imbalance in forces that connected the individual to the wider world. Every culture reached for this explanation independently, because the human brain, left alone with suffering it cannot see or touch, will always search for a cause that connects the internal to the external. This might seem like superstition when viewed from the outside, but look at what it actually accomplished. The healer, the shaman, the medicine person, the elder, who performed ritual over a sick individual was doing something that modern science has spent decades trying to understand and quantify. They were activating the placebo response, one of the most reproducible effects in all of medicine. They were reducing stress hormones that actively suppress immune function. They were giving the sick person something that cannot be bottled but can absolutely be measured. The belief that something was being done, that they were not invisible, that the group was surrounding them. The difference between a sick person who believes they are being cared for and one who believes they are alone is not trivial, it is biological. Belief was never nothing. In humans, it never has been. There were, of course, illnesses that no amount of care or plants or ritual could stop. Infection was the great equalizer. Wound infections killed quickly and without mercy. Waterborne illness spread through camps and could wipe out entire family groups within days. Respiratory infections swept through bands during cold, wet seasons when people slept close together for warmth. Childbirth, already carrying enormous risk, became fatal when infection followed. Parasites lived inside nearly every ancient human body, not as an aberration, not as a sign of poor hygiene by our standards, but as a simple and constant companion of life, lived close to water, animals, and soil. The paleoanthropologist John Hawks at the University of Wisconsin has noted that ancient human skeletons regularly show signs of healed fractures, bone infections, and nutritional deficiency, evidence of lives that were physically brutal in ways that are difficult for most people today to fully imagine. But the skeletons also show something else. They show survival. The fractures healed cleanly. The infections resolved. The person kept living, which means someone had helped them through it. And that is the detail that tends to get buried under everything else. The story of ancient illness is not primarily a story about suffering. It is a story about resilience. It is a story about what humans did for each other when the body failed, what they reached for, what they refused to give up on. It is the story of the invention of care itself, not as a medical system, not as an institution, but as a human reflex, older than language, older than fire, baked into what it means to be this kind of animal. Every time someone pressed a plant against a wound that it helped, without knowing why, Every time someone coaxed water into the mouth of a person too weak to lift their own head. Every time someone stayed through the long, cold hours of the night with a sick child with nothing to offer but presence. That was medicine. That was the beginning of all of it. You carry that history inside you in more ways than one. Your immune system is a relic of 500 million years of survival. Your instinct to rest when sick is an ancient program written into the deepest grammar of your biology. Your instinct to go towards someone when you are ill, to not be alone with it, to want someone close. That did not begin with hospitals or doctors, or the invention of the prescription. It began in small bands of early humans who understood, without words for it, that the survival of one person was bound up in the survival of everyone. The next time you feel that heaviness behind the eyes, that slow ache spreading through your joints, your body is not failing. It is doing exactly what it was built to do. And somewhere underneath all of it, quieter than a fever and older than anything you could name, something else is running. The same pull your ancestors felt to reach toward someone, to not go through it alone. That pull is older than language. It is, perhaps, the oldest medicine there ever was.